Good day, and welcome to another CCS Candy webinar. My name is Martin Janssen from Rensburg, and I am part of the team here at CCS Mining and Industrial. It is my pleasure to present today's webinar, where we will be discussing Candy's markup application. I aim to keep this webinar relatively short, focusing on all key points regarding this topic. Due to the large number of people logged on, we will not be able to answer any questions during the presentation. However, please submit your questions during the webinar via the provided chat function on screen. Afterwards, we will collate these questions and send the answers to everybody that registered for this webinar via email. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and you will receive a link to download the recording. Should you not be able to attend the webinar at the scheduled time, please still register as you will automatically receive a copy of the recording. Candy allows for different methods of applying markup to your net rate to accurately add a profit and risk percentage to your tender. This webinar will demonstrate the effectiveness of these functions and how to apply it using different methods. At tender stage, we price our bill of quantities using first principles. So we will build up the rate of an item by combining resources with their rate, as well as adding production and wastage. All of this multiplied by the bill quantity calculates your net rate. After establishing the net rate, we will start applying markup, which will in turn provide us with a gross rate. However, if our markup is set, any changes to the net rate will essentially affect our gross rate. So a decrease in the net rate will decrease our gross rate, as well as any increase in the net rate will increase the gross rate. So in Candy, we can copy the gross rate to a selling rate, which can be locked, and this being done, our markup becomes the calculated rate, and the selling rate thus remains unchanged. To find out more about selling rates, please refer to our previous webinar on this topic. Markup is made up of two components, and both can be applied at the same time. This consists of a markup percentage applied to the net rate and also a risk percentage, which is applied to selected resource columns. It can be applied to trades or individually. It is important to note also that markup is the property of a price code. So changing the markup will change the markup and rate wherever the price code is used. After this webinar, you'll be able to apply markup using different methods, which are markup on all trades, a trade markup, individual markup, resource type risk markup. We will also look at a trade totals display using our gross rates. And we will also print the bill of quantities using our gross rate. Firstly, we will look at applying markup to all trades. For this, I will access the Candy program. Now looking at our markup bill, which can be found under the Estimating Document Manager, our net and gross rates should be similar at this stage because no markup has been applied yet. All of the markup functions can be found by right-clicking on the markup percentage column under General Markup Utilities. The same options can be found under Finalization, and then selecting Markup. However, for this webinar, we will be accessing the functions under the Markup build document only. When looking at Markup All Trades, this will apply a single specified percentage across all trades. Flagged trades can be excluded from this markup, individual markup will not be overwritten, and your resource risk percentage will not be affected. To apply a markup across all trades, I will access my markup utilities under Markup Percentage, General Markup Utilities, and I will select Markup All Trades. I will apply a single markup percentage of 12% across all of my price codes that do not have an individual markup. As mentioned before, you can see the option for preserving flagged trade markups. If I click back on my document, I can see under the markup percentage column that all of my items, all of my trade has been marked up by 12%. And under the type column, it is indicated the type of markup that I applied, which is a trade markup. The next method we will look at will be applying markup to a specific trade. Only selected trades will be affected by the specified markup. Individual markup will not be overwritten. This can be copied from the master, and your markup will once again be shown against each trade. To do this, I will once again access my markup utilities. However, this time I will select the option of trade markup. This will then show me a list of all of my trades used in this job, and I can specify per trade which trade I want to apply a markup to. I will apply a 12% to my earthworks and 15% to my concrete. If, however, I want to exclude a specific trade from being marked up using this process, I can select to flag a specific trade. This will then exclude that trade from being marked up. To flag a trade, I will simply click in the F column and I can select Set Markup Flag. This will then flag a trade and it will not be included in this markup. Once I have set all my markup, I can simply close this window, and if I click back on my document, I can see that my concrete items all have a trade markup of 15%. Next, we will look at applying markup to individual items. Individual markup can also be copied from the master. If individual markup is cleared, it will automatically revert to the trade markup as specified earlier. Your individual markup has no effect on the resource type risk, which is applied over and above the individual markup. Applying an individual markup can be done by simply retyping the percentage in the markup percentage column. I will select the item of clear sight and strip topsoil, and I wish to apply a 15% markup to that specific item. I will simply retype that percentage, confirm that I wish to change to individual markup, and I can see that my markup percentage for that specific item is 15%, and in the type column it is indicated that an individual markup is being used. Resource type risk markup. As previously mentioned, we can also apply a percentage markup to the resource type components of a net rate. For example, if you want to mark up all the labor content of your net rate by a further 10%. If both trade or individual markup and risk are used, there will be markup on markup. The resource type risk is always added to the net rate before applying trade or individual markup. The gross rate will then be calculated as follows. Your net rate plus the risk percentage markup on the specified resource type, including then on that the markup percentage as specified in your markup bill. To apply the resource type risk markup, we will access the function once again under my markup percentage column. General markup utilities, and select my resource type risk. This will open a list of my different resource types, where I can identify the different risk percentages for each resource type. I'm going to allocate 6.5% risk on my labor resources. If I now go back to my markup bill, I can see how the resource type risk is allocated. This can be seen under my resource risk percentage column. There is also a function in Candy where the resource type risk can be transferred to my markup, thus zeroing the resource risk percentage and replacing the trade or individual markup with the previously allocated risk percentage. So the percentages that were in the resource type percentage columns will be transferred to the markup percentage column. There is also a function available for changing any individual markup to a trade markup, essentially clearing the individual markup and using the trade markup as previously indicated. Once again, this can be found under my markup percentage column. And then selecting changing to trade markup. By doing this, I can see my individual markup, which was applied to my clear sight strip topsoil item, has now been replaced by the trade markup as previously identified. More advanced markup functions include setting the gross total amount before the estimate to a specific amount. For instance, management might say at finalization that a specific tender value needs to be set. We can do this in Candy by stipulating the amount required, and Candy will then allocate or deallocate markup in proportion to the current markups, taking into account indirect costs, individual markup, and resource type risk. This can be done using bill quantities, final quantities, or the number of quantities. Certain trades can also be flagged on the trade markup to be excluded from this markup adjustment. To do this, I'll once again access my markup utilities. And I will select Set Gross Total. On this window, I can then set the selected amount or be preserving any flagged trade markups, so any trades that were flagged earlier will not be affected by the spread. I will not be including my indirect costs, and although I have the option to select this function to be applied to specific trades, I'm just going to do the spread evenly. The effects will be displayed on my markup bill. The gross amount that I have set will be displayed at the bottom, and my markup has now been spread evenly based on that amount that I have set. The last markup function I would like to show you would be to clear all of your markup. This can be found under Finalization, Markup, and my very last function there is to clear all markup. This will clear all of the markup from your markup bill that has been applied. Once the markup has been finalized, we can go and view the results under various reporting formats. Firstly, I will look at my trade totals display on gross rate. I can access my trade totals display by clicking on the pie chart at the top. Under the different options I have available, I can view my markup under either the gross or selling rates and viewing any quantities available under the drop-down menu. If the marked up rate breakdown is selected, the rates will be spread over the resource type split columns in proportion to the net rates. Printing the markup coefficient will display the markup as a coefficient of the net allowable. First, I'll just display printing the gross amounts to be able to view my markup. The markup is displayed on the far right for each individual trade. In this view, I can also choose to display only my markup and risk by selecting View, and my last option at the bottom, Display Markup and Risk. This will display only my markup and risk amount. I can also choose to view everything as percentages, which can be found under View as well, and selecting Display Percentages. You can now see my values displayed as percentages. When running my trade totals display again and selecting the option of marked up rate breakdown, markup is now included in the amounts as opposed to separately on the far right as shown previously. To demonstrate the markup coefficient, I will run the trade totals on gross again, selecting the print markup coefficient, and this will then display my markup as a coefficient of my net allowable based on the selling rate, with my coefficient being displayed on the far right hand side of my trade totals display. For alternative reporting, I will print a bill of quantities using the gross rates that have been established. I can find my reports under the Estimating Report Manager, and under my Estimating Report Manager I can see I have different reports available which have been set to using our gross rate. I have a bill of quantities carried forward, brought forward on my gross rate, collection pages, page totals, continuous listing, so a vast amount of default reports run on my gross rate. To preview this, I simply click on preview. This will then view my report, my bill of quantities carried forward, brought forward, looking at my gross rate. As I scroll through my report, I can see a bill quantity being used and my gross rate being displayed. And that gross rate, as I mentioned before, will include my markup. Lastly, previously I mentioned my selling rate. So to end off this webinar, I'm going to transfer my gross rate to my selling rates. I can access a specific document for transferring my gross to my selling rate under my Estimating Document Manager. And 1.7 is my selling bill of quantities. This document will display columns for both my gross and selling rates and amounts. And as can be seen currently, my selling rate and amount column is still empty. To copy my gross rates, I'm going to right-click under the selling rates column and select Copy Selling Rate from Gross. I will select all of my options, especially the Lock Selling Rates After Copy. This will then lock all of my selling rates after they have been copied, and they cannot be changed unless I unlock these rates again. So click on OK. My selling rates have now been updated based on my gross rates. And as you can see at the moment, the selling and gross rates remain the same. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my Candy Markup webinar. I hope this session has been informative and that we have added even more value to your day-to-day utilization of Candy and its implementation in your organization and everyday working environment. Thank you to all the attendees, and also a big thank you to all our users allowing Candy to make a difference on your projects and within your organizations. Please remember to email your local CCS office if you want to know more about Candy's markup utilities or have any other queries. Remember, if you cannot attend the webinar, please still register and you will receive a recording of the session which you can watch in your own time. Until the next webinar, goodbye.